struggling widower buys family of 7 at auction. What he did next shocked the whole town. John Miller had always been a quiet man, the kind of person who preferred the company of his thoughts to large crowds. His life had changed drastically a few years ago, when his beloved wife Anna passed away suddenly. She had been his closest friend, his partner, and the anchor of his small world. After her death, John's home felt emptier than it ever had, and even simple tasks seemed overwhelming. The walls of his small house, which once held the laughter of a family, now echoed with silence. John lived alone in a modest, weathered house on the outskirts of his town. It was not much, just 3 small rooms, a kitchen that had seen better days, and a backyard that was more weeds than grass. The house had been his and Anna's dream once, and even though it was far from perfect, it reminded him of happier times. Every morning he would wake up early, make himself a cup of coffee, and sit by the window, staring at the street where children used to play, wondering how life had changed so quickly. He worked at a local factory, a job that paid enough to keep the lights on and the fridge stocked, but little else. The work was hard and tiring, but John never complained. He found comfort in knowing that his hands, tired and rough as they were, could still provide something for himself. Some days, after long hours on the factory floor, he would sit on his porch and watch the sunset, thinking about Anna and the life they had imagined together. Despite his struggles, John was known in the town for his generosity. He might not have had much, but he always found a way to help those around him. If a neighbor was short on groceries, he would share what he had. If someone's car broke down, he would offer a ride or lend a hand with repairs. People respected him quietly because they knew John was a man of integrity, someone who acted not for recognition, but because he truly cared. One crisp autumn morning, as John walked to the local market, he noticed a small crowd gathered near the courthouse. Curious, he slowed his pace and saw a large sign, "County Auction Today." He had passed by auctions before, but he had never thought much about them. Today, however, something in the air made him stop. The voices of the crowd buzzed with excitement and curiosity. People were talking in hushed, urgent tones about the items being sold, the interesting things hidden in plain sight, and some even whispered stories of tragedy. As he edged closer, John overheard snippets of conversation that caught his attention. One man was saying something about a family that had lost both parents. John's heart skipped a beat. He paused, listening carefully. 7 children, no guardian. Everything up for auction, the man whispered. John felt a sudden pang in his chest. The words lingered in his mind, and he found himself moving closer, wanting to understand more. The auction was unusual. It was not just about furniture or antiques. It was about lives disrupted. Items once belonging to a family were spread across tables: clothes, toys, books, dishes, and small personal items that hinted at a once happy home. But it was not the objects themselves that drew John in. It was the story behind them. He learned that the children had lost both their parents unexpectedly, leaving them with no one to care for them. The court had ordered that their belongings be sold to cover certain expenses, but no one had thought about who would care for the children themselves. John walked slowly among the tables, his eyes lingering on small, personal items that spoke of a family's life. A faded teddy bear, a small pair of worn shoes, a stack of colorful drawings made by tiny hands. He imagined the children who had created these things, their laughter and play, now replaced with confusion and fear. A lump formed in his throat as he felt the weight of the situation. These were not just objects. They were pieces of a family's life, moments, frozen in time. He realized that the children themselves were not at the auction. They were in the care of social services. But the thought of them, alone and scared, tugged at something deep within him. John had been alone for too long, but he had never felt empty in the way he imagined these children might feel. His mind raced. Could he do something? Should he do something? He knew that he could not take all their troubles away, but the idea of helping in some small way filled him with determination. John had little money saved. Most of it went to rent, food, and bills. But he felt a strange certainty that day, a call he could not ignore. He decided, almost on instinct, to bid on the family's belongings, not for the objects themselves, but because it was a way, however small, to take responsibility, to act. He had never been a man to gamble with his life, yet here he was, preparing to make a decision that would change everything. As the auctioneer called out items, John raised his hand, surprising even himself. Each bid he made was more than just a number. It was a promise to himself, a commitment to the idea that he could make a difference. The room was silent for a moment as others realized he was bidding not for profit or curiosity, but with purpose. Finally, after a tense few minutes, John won the auction. His heart pounded, not from excitement, but from the weight of responsibility he had just accepted. That evening, John returned to his small house, carrying with him boxes and bags filled with the belongings of the children he had never met. The house felt heavier, fuller, in a strange way. He carefully unpacked each item, treating it with respect and care. He could not yet imagine what the future held, but he knew that something had shifted. He was no longer just a struggling widower. He was a man who had taken on a responsibility that would test him in ways he could not foresee. He sat in the quiet of his living room that night, surrounded by toys, clothes, and books, and allowed himself to feel hope for the first time in years. John did not know how he would manage the children, how he would feed 7 more mouths, or how he would navigate the challenges ahead. But he knew that he could not ignore the call to help. The rest of the town might not understand his decision, and some might even think him foolish, but John felt something stronger than fear, a sense of purpose. As he lay in bed that night, John imagined the children arriving, shy and wary, their eyes wide with uncertainty. He imagined himself greeting them with kindness, showing them that not everyone had abandoned them. He thought about the life he could offer, simple though it might be, and the warmth that could grow in his home. Sleep came slowly, but when it did, it carried with it dreams of laughter, of hope, and of the life that was about to change forever, not just for John, but for 7 children he had never met, yet already felt responsible for. The next morning, John woke with determination. He began making plans, listing the things he would need to do to prepare for the children. He cleaned his house from top to bottom, arranged the rooms as best he could, and even fixed some old furniture that had seen better days. Each task reminded him that he was not just preparing a space, he was preparing a home. He was preparing to step into a role that would challenge him in ways he had never imagined. The townspeople, meanwhile, had begun to notice John's unusual behavior. Whispers spread quickly. "Did you hear what John Miller did?" One neighbor said to another. "He bought the belongings of 7 children at the auction. Can he even take care of them?" Some shook their heads in disbelief, others in admiration. But John did not dwell on their opinions. He had made a choice, and he intended to see it through, no matter what. John's journey as a widower had taught him resilience, patience, and empathy, but nothing had prepared him for the road ahead, a road that would test his limits, his courage, and his heart. As he looked out of his window at the quiet streets, he felt a strange mix of fear and excitement. He knew the coming days would not be easy, yet for the first time in a long time, he felt a spark of something he thought he had lost forever: hope. And so John Miller, the quiet widower who had lost so much, began the first steps of an extraordinary journey, one that would not only change his life, but the lives of 7 children who had lost everything. In the simple act of bidding at an auction, John had taken the first step towards something much greater than himself, a story of compassion, courage, and the power of a kind heart. The next morning, John woke with a strange mix of nervousness and excitement. His house, once quiet and empty, now seemed to hum with possibility. He walked through each room, imagining 7 children living there, filling the space with laughter, chatter, and curiosity. The small living room that had always felt a little cold now had the potential to be warm, full of life. The bedrooms, simple and modest, could be transformed into cozy spaces where each child might feel safe. He began by unpacking the boxes he had won at the auction. Each item told a story. A little blue jacket, slightly worn at the edges, reminded him of the innocence of childhood. A stack of well-loved storybooks carried the echoes of bedtime tales and whispered dreams. Toys, simple yet cherished, seemed to hum with memories of play. John handled each item gently, as if by caring for them he could somehow care for the children themselves. As he arranged the house, John realized the magnitude of what he had taken on. 7 children, with no parents and no immediate family, would soon arrive. He had to consider meals, clothing, school, emotional support, and even just the space to sleep and breathe. His small income, which had barely covered his own needs, now seemed impossibly limited. But John did not let fear stop him. He reminded himself that even if he had little, he had love, patience, and a determination to make a difference. The day passed slowly, filled with preparations. John cleaned every corner of the house, making sure there were no hazards, and set up the bedrooms with whatever furniture he could manage. The kitchen, once sparse, now had small baskets of groceries and snacks he had bought on credit, stretching every dollar as far as it could go. He even found old blankets from his attic, washing and repairing them so that the children would have something comfortable to sleep on. Despite his careful planning, John could not shake a sense of uncertainty. He wondered how the children would react to him. Would they trust him? Would they be frightened or resentful? He had no experience raising children, let alone 7 at once. Yet, as he carried each small item from the auction into the house, he felt a growing sense of purpose. The fear remained, but it was accompanied by a quiet determination that he could not ignore. That afternoon, John went into town to gather a few more supplies. He stopped by the local store and picked up clothes in various sizes, trying to anticipate what the children might need. He bought school supplies, snacks, and a few small treats, simple things that might make the children feel welcome and valued. As he walked through the streets, carrying bags that felt heavier than usual, he noticed neighbors watching him curiously. Whispers followed him. John Miller, buying for the children at the auction. Some shook their heads, uncertain if he was making a wise choice, while others smiled quietly, moved by his selflessness. Returning home, John set the supplies in neat piles, arranging everything so that it would be easy to find. The house, though still modest, began to take on a sense of order and readiness. He even prepared a small welcome note, simple words of kindness he hoped would help the children feel less afraid. "You are safe here. You are welcome. You are not alone." It was a small gesture, but John believed that kindness, even in tiny doses, could make a big difference. Evening came, and John sat on his porch sipping a cup of tea, The sun painted the sky in shades of orange and pink, and for a moment he allowed himself to imagine what life might look like once the children arrived. He imagined the sound of little feet running down the hallway, laughter spilling into the living room, and the chatter of young voices sharing stories and dreams. The thought made his heart both ache and swell with hope. Sleep came fitfully that night. John dreamed of the children, some laughing, some crying, some shyly holding his hand. He imagined the challenges he would face: school mornings, arguments, homesickness, and moments of doubt. But he also dreamed of joy: first steps into the home, first smiles, first small victories that would make all the effort worthwhile. When he woke, he felt a strange sense of calm. Whatever challenges lay ahead, he knew he could face them. The following morning, John received a call from social services. They informed him that the children would be arriving the next day. 7 children, ranging in age from 4 to 16, would be placed temporarily in his care. John's heart pounded. He had prepared his home as best he could, but he knew that no amount of preparation could fully ready him for the reality of 7 children entering his life at once. Still, he felt ready in a way he could not explain. John spent the day finalizing the house. He labeled each bedroom with simple name tags he had made himself, hoping the children would feel a sense of ownership and belonging. He arranged their clothes and toys in accessible places and set up a small corner in the living room as a reading area. He even found an old board game in the attic, imagining evenings spent laughing together over simple entertainment. Every task, though small, was infused with hope and care. Neighbors began to take notice. Mrs. Thompson from down the street stopped by with a basket of freshly baked bread. "I thought these might help," she said softly, glancing around the house. John thanked her sincerely, feeling the weight of community support starting to form. Slowly, whispers of skepticism turned into quiet admiration. People were beginning to see that John's act was not reckless. It was brave, kind, and deeply human. The morning of the children's arrival was bright and crisp. John woke early, checking every corner of the house once more. He straightened the blankets, set out breakfast, and made sure the home felt warm and welcoming. Outside, the streets were quiet, but John could feel the tension in his own chest. He reminded himself that he needed patience. The children had suffered loss, and trust would not come easily. But he was determined to give them safety, comfort, and care. When the car from social services pulled up, John felt a mixture of fear and anticipation. But, one by one, the children stepped out, carrying small bags and looking around with cautious eyes. John greeted them gently, keeping his voice soft and calm. "Hello," he said. "Welcome. My name is John. You are safe here." Some of the children hesitated, unsure, while others looked at him with curiosity. He offered smiles and quiet words of reassurance, hoping to ease their anxiety. Inside the house, the children explored carefully. John showed them their rooms, letting each child choose a bed and unpack a small portion of their belongings. The youngest clung to a small stuffed animal, while the oldest examined the bookshelves with interest. John watched silently, letting them move at their own pace, understanding that trust could not be rushed. He offered snacks and warm drinks, and slowly small smiles began to appear. The first meals were simple, but shared with a sense of togetherness. John tried to make conversation, asking about favorite foods, school, and hobbies. Some children spoke hesitantly, others with more confidence. He listened patiently, learning their personalities, fears, and dreams. In those early moments, John realized that caring for the children would be a constant learning process. He could not solve all their problems, but he could offer stability, love, and a safe place to call home. As the day ended, John sat in his living room, exhausted but fulfilled. The house, once silent and lonely, now felt alive. He watched the children slowly begin to relax, laughing quietly over a game or reading books in their corners. He felt a warmth in his chest that he had not felt in years. This was more than responsibility. It was connection, purpose, and a chance to make a real difference. Even that evening, John reflected on the journey ahead. He knew there would be challenges, disagreements, homesickness, and moments of frustration. But he also knew that every small act of kindness, every patient word, and every effort to provide care would shape a brighter future for these children. He felt a quiet determination settle within him, stronger than fear or doubt. By the time the children went to bed, John's house had transformed. Laughter, tears, curiosity, and cautious trust had all filled the rooms. He knew the road ahead would not be easy, but he also knew it would be worth it. In opening his home to 7 children, John Miller had not just taken on a challenge, he had embraced an extraordinary opportunity to heal, to grow, and to give a family the love and support they desperately needed. And as he finally lay down to rest, John allowed himself a small smile. The auction had been the start of something unexpected, something greater than himself. He had no idea what the future would bring, but for the first time in a long time, he felt ready to face it with courage, patience, and a heart full of hope. Life for John Miller changed completely once the children settled into his home. The quiet days he had once known were gone, replaced by the sounds of chatter, laughter, and sometimes tears. He quickly realized that taking care of 7 children was far more challenging than he had imagined. It was not just about providing food and a roof over their heads. It was about guiding them, understanding them, and helping them feel safe in a world that had already taken so much from them. The first challenge was routines. Each child had a different schedule and different needs. The youngest, a 4-year-old named Emily, needed constant attention and supervision, while the oldest, 16-year-old David, was struggling with feelings of anger and confusion. John tried to keep the household organized, setting times for meals, study, and play. Some days went smoothly, but others were chaotic. Toys were scattered across the living room, homework was forgotten, and arguments sometimes erupted over small disagreements. John had to remind himself to stay patient. These children had lost a great deal, and adjusting to a new life under one roof would take time. Meals became a daily test of John's resourcefulness. He had to stretch his modest budget to provide enough food for 8 people, including himself. Some mornings there was barely enough milk for cereal, but he always found a way to make it work. He taught the children how to help in the kitchen, showing them how to prepare simple meals and encouraging them to take small responsibilities. While it was exhausting at first, these shared tasks slowly became a bonding experience. Cooking together, they laughed over spilled milk and burnt toast, discovering moments of joy amid the challenges. School was another hurdle. Each child attended a different grade, and John was determined to help them succeed academically. He spent hours assisting with homework, reading with the younger children, and encouraging the older ones to study. David, the eldest, often struggled with focus and motivation. John learned to speak to him patiently, listening to his frustrations and helping him set small, achievable goals. The children were hesitant at first, unsure whether they could trust him fully, but over time they began to open up, sharing their thoughts and feelings. Despite the difficulties, John found moments of joy every day. He watched Emily's eyes light up when she drew colorful pictures, listened to the sound of laughter as the children played in the backyard, and felt a sense of pride when one of the children mastered a difficult task or solved a problem on their own. These moments reminded him why he had taken on such a huge responsibility in the first place. It was not about recognition or reward. It was about giving these children a chance at a normal, happy life. However, the emotional challenges were often the hardest part. Some of the children experienced nightmares or moments of sadness, recalling the family and home they had lost. John became a patient listener, offering comfort without pushing them to talk before they were ready. He understood that healing took time. He also noticed how their behavior sometimes reflected fear and mistrust. Arguments would flare unexpectedly. Tears would flow, and at times it felt overwhelming. Yet John never gave up. He reminded himself that love and consistency were the foundations of trust. The youngest, Emily, often clung to John, seeking reassurance and comfort. He learned to carry her through the house, sing softly to calm her, and offer hugs whenever she felt scared. The middle children, aged 8 to 12, were more independent but still needed guidance and attention. John found creative ways to engage them, from teaching them games to helping them develop new hobbies. Slowly, he noticed changes. Their laughter became more frequent, their eyes brighter, and their smiles more genuine. David, the oldest, was the most complicated to reach. At 16, he struggled with the sudden changes in his life and felt the absence of parental guidance deeply. Sometimes he would retreat to his room, refusing to speak or join the rest of the family. John realized that trust with David would not come overnight. He spent quiet evenings sitting beside him, sharing stories of his own childhood, discussing dreams, and listening to David's frustrations without judgment. Little by little, David began to open up, recognizing that John truly cared for him. Outside the home, John faced additional challenges. Some neighbors were skeptical, whispering about whether he could manage so many children alone. The local school, while supportive, raised concerns about the children's welfare and academic needs. John attended meetings with teachers and social workers, answering questions honestly and showing his dedication. He worked tirelessly to demonstrate that, though he was just one man with limited resources, he was committed to providing a stable and loving environment. Despite exhaustion, John found creative ways to bring joy into the children's lives. He took them on small outings to local parks, teaching them to play games and explore nature. He borrowed books from the library and encouraged reading as a way to learn and escape into imaginary worlds. On weekends, they would bake simple treats together, laugh over mistakes, and enjoy quiet evenings sharing stories before bedtime. Slowly, the house transformed from a place of uncertainty into a home filled with warmth and hope. John also sought support from friends and neighbors. Mrs. Thompson, who had brought bread when the children first arrived, often dropped by with small gifts or helpful advice. Other neighbors donated clothes, toys, and furniture, offering assistance without expecting anything in return. John realized that while he had started this journey alone, the community support was vital. The townspeople, once doubtful, began to see the positive changes and started contributing in small ways, proving that collective effort could make a tremendous difference. Through all of this, John learned about the power of patience. Every small step mattered. The first time a child trusted him enough to speak about their feelings, the first night they all slept peacefully, or the first time a homework problem was solved without frustration. These victories were tiny but meaningful, and they built the foundation for trust and love within the household. John found fulfillment not in the absence of challenges, but in witnessing resilience and growth. The nights were quiet but reflective. After putting the children to bed, John would sit in the living room, reviewing the day's events. He thought about the small victories, the setbacks, and the lessons learned. Sometimes he felt the weight of exhaustion pressing down, but he also felt a profound sense of purpose. This was more than just caring for children. It was about shaping lives, offering stability, and nurturing hope. Every day brought new challenges, but each day also brought new reasons to keep going. Over time, the children began to adjust. Emily, once shy and withdrawn, laughed freely as she played with her siblings. The middle children started forming bonds, helping each other with schoolwork and household chores. Even David, the oldest, began to take small steps toward trust, sharing his thoughts with John and helping guide the younger children. John marveled at their resilience. Despite the pain and loss they had endured, they were capable of healing, growing, and finding joy again. John also noticed changes in himself. The quiet, lonely widower who had once spent evenings staring out the window had transformed into a man with purpose and strength. He discovered patience he did not know he possessed, compassion that grew deeper with each day, and resilience that matched the challenges before him. The children's trust and progress became his motivation, and their laughter became the soundtrack of his life. Even the simple moments, like reading a bedtime story, preparing breakfast, or helping with school projects, held profound significance. John realized that these small, everyday acts of care were the foundation of a loving household. He learned that being present, listening, and showing consistent kindness mattered more than grand gestures or perfect solutions. As weeks turned into months, John's home became a sanctuary. The children, once uncertain and fearful, now felt secure and valued. They shared secrets, laughed over silly games, and helped each other navigate daily life. John's dedication, patience, and love had turned a challenging situation into a nurturing environment. Though he faced ongoing struggles, the progress was undeniable. John reflected often on how a simple decision at an auction had led to this life. What had begun as an impulsive bid had grown into a life-changing responsibility, full of challenges, rewards, and profound lessons. He had opened his home and heart, and in return, he had received the gift of connection, purpose, and joy. Even as he faced exhaustion, unexpected problems, and moments of doubt, John knew he had made the right choice. Caring for 7 children was not easy, but it was meaningful, rewarding, and transformative. Every day he watched resilience bloom, trust grow, and love flourish within the walls of his home. He realized that sometimes the greatest challenges bring the deepest rewards. And so John's life continued, full of the daily ups and downs of caring for 7 children. Each challenge became an opportunity, each setback a lesson, and each small victory a reason to keep going. Through it all, John learned that love, patience, and dedication could overcome even the most daunting obstacles. The house that had once been quiet and empty was now alive, a place of hope, growth, and connection. John Miller, the struggling widower, had taken on a responsibility that many would have thought impossible. Yet with determination, compassion, and the support of his community, he was creating something extraordinary. A family, not born of blood, but built with heart, care, and unwavering commitment. As the days turned into weeks, John Miller began to notice something remarkable. The small town, which had been skeptical of his ability to care for 7 children, slowly started to change its opinion. People who had once whispered doubts now spoke with admiration. They had seen the children's laughter, the way the home was slowly transforming, and the dedication John showed day after day. His efforts were not perfect, and the challenges were real. But the town could not deny the love and care he poured into every moment. It began with small gestures. Mrs. Thompson, who had been the first neighbor to bring bread, started visiting more regularly. She brought clothes that no longer fit her own children, offering them to John's household. She also shared practical advice about cooking for large families and keeping children engaged after school. Soon, other neighbors began stopping by, offering toys, school supplies, and even small pieces of furniture. Each contribution, no matter how small, became a building block of hope for the children. The children themselves noticed the growing support. Emily, the youngest, often clutched the new toys that neighbors had donated, her eyes wide with joy. The middle children loved the new books and games, discovering worlds of adventure they had never imagined. Even David, the eldest, quietly appreciated the extra support, learning that community could be a source of comfort rather than judgment. These gestures showed the children that they were not alone and that people cared about their well-being. John was careful to show the children that the support from the community was not a replacement for family love, but an extension of it. He explained that while he would always be there for them, the kindness of neighbors and friends could make their lives richer and more enjoyable. He encouraged the children to express gratitude and to understand that the world could offer help when people were open to giving it. Over time, this lesson became a guiding principle for the household. One day, a local teacher, Mrs. Reynolds, visited the house. She had heard of John's efforts and wanted to offer additional support. She suggested ways to help the children academically, brought extra learning materials, and offered to tutor them after school. John welcomed her help, knowing that each child's education was a priority. Emily loved reading with her, while the older children enjoyed engaging in science experiments and creative writing exercises. Slowly, the children's confidence grew, both academically and personally. The town itself began to see changes in unexpected ways. Local shopkeepers offered discounts when John shopped for groceries, understanding that feeding 8 people on a small budget was no easy task. The library extended their borrowing limits so the children could have access to more books. Even the local park staff welcomed the children, organizing small recreational activities that allowed them to play and socialize safely. It was as if John's determination had sparked a wave of community care, touching people in ways that were unseen but deeply felt. John, however, remained humble. He never asked for help and often downplayed his own efforts. He believed that caring for the children was his responsibility, and the support of the community was simply a wonderful addition. Yet, as he witnessed neighbors working together to bring joy and stability to his home, he realized that this unity could have an impact far beyond his own household. It showed the children that even in difficult times, people could come together to create positive change. The children also began to form their own connections within the community. Emily would visit Mrs. Thompson, helping her with small chores and learning simple life skills. The middle children joined local youth clubs and participated in group activities, slowly building friendships outside the house. David, hesitant at first, began helping in the local library and mentoring younger kids in reading. John watched proudly, realizing that by giving these children a stable home, he had also given them a place in the wider world. John also learned the importance of community support for himself. Raising 7 children was exhausting, both physically and emotionally. There were nights when he lay awake, worried about how he would manage school assignments, meals, and emotional needs, all at once. But he began to rely on the kindness of others, learning that seeking help did not make him weak. It made him stronger. He formed connections with neighbors and professionals who offered guidance, reassurance, and companionship, creating a network that bolstered the family's success. One particularly memorable day was when the children decided to organize a small celebration for John. Using donated supplies, they decorated the living room with paper chains, handmade drawings, and small gifts. Emily proudly presented a card she had drawn herself, while the older children contributed notes of appreciation. John was deeply touched. He realized that his efforts were not just changing the children's lives, they were teaching them gratitude, empathy, and the joy of giving. It was a moment that reminded him why he had taken this journey in the first place. The school year brought new challenges and victories. Some of the children struggled with learning gaps from the months they had been without consistent guidance. But John, with the help of teachers and volunteers, created a study routine, They worked on reading, math, and writing skills each day, and slowly the children began to catch up. Their confidence grew and their excitement for learning became contagious. David, who had initially resisted help, began to excel in subjects he had once found difficult, surprising even his teachers. John also introduced small household rules to teach responsibility and cooperation. Each child had a role, from setting the table to tidying their rooms, and these tasks became part of their daily routine. While there were disagreements at first, they gradually learned to work together and support one another. The house became a living classroom where life skills were taught alongside academics. The children discovered teamwork, patience, and the importance of contributing to the household, lessons that would stay with them for life. The emotional growth of the children was equally remarkable. Trust, which had been fragile at first, strengthened each day. Laughter replaced tears, curiosity replaced fear, and moments of joy became more frequent. They began to share their dreams with John, discussing careers, hobbies, and adventures they wished to pursue. He listened patiently, encouraging them and showing that their aspirations were important. The children learned that their voices mattered and that a caring environment could nurture their potential. The wider town began to notice the impact of John's efforts. People who had once doubted him now spoke of his dedication with admiration. His story became an example of compassion and resilience, inspiring others to contribute to their community. Local newspapers wrote articles, neighbors shared stories, and soon the family became known not just for their struggles, but for the hope, courage, and unity they represented. Despite all the praise and support, John remained focused on the children. He knew that real change happened quietly, in the small moments of care and attention, not in public recognition. He celebrated their successes, comforted them in failures, and guided them through life's complexities with patience and love. Over time, the children began to see him not just as a caretaker, but as a father figure, a mentor, and a source of unwavering support. The family began to establish traditions. Every Saturday, they would go on small outings, sometimes to the park, sometimes to the library, or even just a walk around town. These outings strengthened bonds, created memories, and allowed the children to feel like a real family. Birthdays, holidays, and small victories were celebrated with enthusiasm, making the children feel valued and loved. John realized that these simple rituals were just as important as meals, school, and chores. They built a sense of belonging that the children had long been missing. Through all of this, John noticed something remarkable happening in himself. His heart, once heavy with grief from losing Anna, began to heal in ways he had never imagined. Caring for these children, guiding them, and watching them grow brought him joy and fulfillment that he had not experienced in years. He understood that while he had been the one offering love and stability, he was also receiving something profound in return: the warmth of connection, the joy of shared moments, and the satisfaction of making a real difference. The family, once fractured by loss, was slowly becoming whole. Their trust in John and in each other grew, and the home, which had started as a quiet, lonely space, now resonated with life, laughter, and hope. The children learned that while they could not replace what they had lost, they could still experience love, security, and joy. And John, who had once walked past an auction on a quiet morning, realized that a single act of courage and compassion could ripple outward, touching not just 7 lives, but an entire community. As months passed, the bond between John and the children strengthened. They faced challenges, of course, sickness, disagreements, and moments of doubt, but the foundation of love, trust, and community support held strong. John knew that this journey was ongoing, and that every day required patience, care, and attention. Yet he also knew that the rewards, smiles, laughter, growth, and love, far outweighed the difficulties. And so, the small house on the outskirts of town became a symbol of hope. What had begun as a shocking decision at an auction had grown into something extraordinary. A family bound not by blood, but by compassion, dedication, and shared life experiences. John Miller, the widower who had struggled alone, had not only given these children a home, he had shown them and the entire town that love, patience, and kindness could overcome even the greatest challenges. Time had passed, and John Miller's life had changed completely. The quiet widower who had once walked past an auction, carrying grief and loneliness in his heart, now lived in a home filled with laughter, chatter, and the constant motion of 7 children. The house that had once echoed with emptiness now vibrated with energy, warmth, and hope. Each day brought its own challenges, but also joy and moments that made every effort worthwhile. John had learned to embrace the unpredictable rhythm of life with 7 children. Mornings were busy, with children brushing their teeth, getting dressed, and rushing through breakfast. While John made sure everyone had lunch packed and homework ready, some mornings were chaotic, filled with arguments over small things like who would sit where at the table or whose turn it was to help set the dishes. Yet John had learned to approach these situations calmly, guiding the children gently rather than with frustration. Slowly, they began to follow routines and work together, learning lessons of patience and cooperation that would stay with them for life. School remained a priority. John knew that education was more than just learning facts. It was about building confidence, curiosity, and resilience. He worked tirelessly with each child, helping with homework, projects, and school presentations. David, the eldest, had grown into a responsible and caring young man. He often helped his younger siblings with reading and math, taking pride in their achievements and becoming a role model in the home. The younger children, inspired by his example, tried harder in their studies, proud of the progress they made under John's patient guidance. Meals continued to be a special time in the household. Though John's budget was always tight, he had grown skilled at preparing nutritious and satisfying food for 8 people. He involved the children in cooking, teaching them to measure ingredients, follow recipes, and clean up after themselves. It was not just about preparing meals, it was about building life skills, teamwork, and the feeling of belonging. Around the dinner table, the children shared stories about their day, laughed over mistakes, and sometimes argued playfully. These moments became the foundation of their family life. As the months turned into years, the children began to thrive. Emily, the youngest, grew into a confident and lively girl, full of curiosity and joy. The middle children developed hobbies and friendships, discovering talents in art, sports, and music. David, now a teenager, started thinking about the future, inspired by the care and stability he had received. John watched proudly, knowing that each child's growth was a reflection of their resilience and the environment of love he had worked to provide. Community support continued to play a crucial role. Neighbors often stopped by with gifts, advice, or simply companionship. The local library, school, and parks welcomed the children, giving them opportunities to learn, play, and socialize. These interactions showed the children that they were part of a larger community, a world that could be kind and supportive. John often reminded them that while he loved them as a father figure, the support and kindness of others could make their lives richer and fuller. One of the most touching moments came during a small community event. The children had prepared a performance, a song and a few short skits, dedicated to John. Emily sang softly while the older children acted out scenes from their favorite stories. John watched from the front, his heart swelling with pride. The audience, made up of neighbors, teachers, and friends, applauded enthusiastically. It was a celebration not just of the children's talents, but of their growth, resilience, and the family they had become. John also focused on teaching the children values that he believed were essential for life: kindness, responsibility, honesty, and empathy. He encouraged them to help one another, respect others, and take pride in their efforts. These lessons went beyond schoolwork or chores. They became principles that guided the children in their interactions with the world. Slowly, he saw them apply these lessons outside the home, helping friends, volunteering, and showing thoughtfulness in their daily lives. The emotional healing in the household was profound. The children, who had once been fearful and uncertain, now felt secure and valued. They learned to express their feelings, ask for help when needed, and support each other through challenges. Even David, who had initially struggled with anger and trust, had transformed into a compassionate young man who guided his siblings with patience. John realized that love, patience, and consistency could heal even the deepest wounds. John himself had changed. He had once been quiet, reserved, and cautious, carrying the weight of grief and loneliness. Through his dedication to the children, he discovered new strengths. He became more confident, resilient, and deeply fulfilled. His home, once a place of emptiness, became the center of his life and purpose. He had learned that family was not just about blood. It was about care, commitment, and shared experiences. Over time, the town began to celebrate John's story. Neighbors spoke of him as a hero, not for fame or recognition, but for his compassion, courage, and selflessness. Local newspapers wrote about his dedication, and the children, now thriving, became symbols of hope and resilience. The story of a struggling widower who took in 7 children captured hearts far beyond the small town, inspiring others to act with kindness and generosity in their own communities. One particularly emotional moment occurred on a quiet evening when John sat with all the children around the fireplace. They shared stories, laughed together, and reflected on how far they had come. Emily hugged John tightly, whispering, "Thank you for taking care of us." David added quietly, "You gave us a home and we'll always be grateful." John felt tears in his eyes. It was not just gratitude he felt. It was a profound sense of fulfillment, knowing that he had created a safe and loving environment for these children to grow into their best selves. Even ordinary days held special moments. Mornings filled with laughter over spilled cereal, afternoons spent reading books or playing games, and evenings filled with shared meals and stories, all became treasured memories. John realized that family was not measured by perfection, but by the love, effort, and dedication poured into each day. He celebrated small victories, knowing that they accumulated into a lifetime of growth and happiness. As the children grew, John helped them develop independence. He taught life skills like cooking, budgeting, cleaning, and decision-making. He encouraged them to pursue their passions, whether it was sports, arts, or academics. He supported their dreams and celebrated achievements, big or small. Over time, the children learned that they were capable, resilient, and deserving of love and respect. John's guidance helped them build confidence that would carry them into the future. The bond between John and the children strengthened with every passing year. They became more than a family. They became a team. They celebrated birthdays, holidays, and milestones together, creating traditions that brought them closer. The home, once quiet and empty, now resonated with laughter, warmth, and love. John realized that through his courage and determination, he had not only transformed the children's lives, but had also found a renewed sense of purpose and joy in his own life. Even challenges continued to arise. Life was not always easy, and there were moments of exhaustion, disagreements, or setbacks. But John had learned that these moments were part of the journey. With patience, empathy, and resilience, he guided the children through difficulties, teaching them problem-solving, forgiveness, and perseverance. Each challenge became an opportunity for growth, bonding, and understanding. The town's perception of John shifted completely. People who had once doubted him now admired his dedication and compassion. His story became an example of what one person could achieve with courage and love. Local organizations and neighbors continued to support the family, but the focus was always on the children and their well-being. John's selfless actions had inspired an entire community, proving that kindness and dedication could create lasting change. Years later, when the children had grown into young adults, John reflected on the journey. He thought about the day he had walked past the auction, the moment he had decided to bid, and the challenges he had faced along the way. Every difficulty, every sleepless night, and every small victory had led to this life, one filled with purpose, connection, and love. The children, once scared and uncertain, had grown into confident, kind, and capable individuals. They were a testament to the power of compassion, patience, and family. John understood that life's greatest rewards often came from acts of courage and love. By opening his home and heart, he had not only changed the lives of 7 children, but he had also transformed his own life in ways he could never have imagined. The bond they shared was unbreakable, built on trust, care, and countless shared moments. Together, they had created a family that was stronger than any obstacle, a family bound not by blood, but by heart. And so, the house on the outskirts of town remained a place of warmth, laughter, and hope. John Miller, the struggling widower who had once walked past an auction, had become a hero, not because he sought recognition, but because he chose love, kindness, and courage over fear and doubt. The children thrived, the community grew stronger, and the story of a man who gave everything he had to change lives became a lasting testament to the power of compassion. In the end, John learned that true family is not defined by circumstance, but by commitment, care, and love. The children had found a home, stability, and guidance. He had found purpose, joy, and a renewed sense of life. Together, they proved that even in the face of loss and adversity, hope, love, and determination could create miracles. And that miracle began with a simple, courageous act. The day John decided to bid at the auction and open his heart to 7 children who had nowhere else to go.